At my 18th birthday celebration, my father leaned in and told me I'd need to sign a few documents later, just a routine formality. I smiled, I nodded, and then I slipped away to the kitchen. I opened my laptop and executed a digital transfer, moving the entirety of my grandparents' substantial inheritance into an airtight, irrevocable trust. It was a simple precaution, just in case. The following day, my parents and my younger sister discovered that everything, the lakeside cottage, the savings, the investment accounts, was now legally protected behind a barrier they couldn't breach. My father's face drained of all color. My uncle, who had already inked a deal to sell a property he didn't actually own, was frantically calling his lawyer. Before I reveal the aftermath, please take a moment to hit like and subscribe. Drop your current city and local time in the comments. I genuinely love seeing where my viewers are tuning in from. Now let's rewind 6 years, to the summer I was 12 at a place called Cedar Lake. That was when my grandfather first told me something I wouldn't fully grasp until the night I turned 18. That summer, my grandfather, Harold, collected me in his old truck and drove 40 minutes to the lake. The cottage sits nestled back from the water, surrounded by soaring white pines that filter the afternoon light. The front porch leans slightly on one side, and the screen door has never quite latched correctly. The interior always smells of wood smoke, aged books, and an indescribably sweet scent I've never been able to place. "Grab the other end," Grandpa instructed, hoisting a fence rail. We spent the morning replacing several rotted posts along the south boundary. He worked with a patient rhythm, showing me how to press my thumb into the wood to test for rot. If it gives, it's done. Inside, my grandmother Vivian had iced tea and sandwiches waiting on the kitchen table, the same table Grandpa built with his own hands the year they were married. I'd find her on the porch later with a book, and she'd pat the seat beside her. We'd watch the lake until the sunlight turned to gold. "The cottage stays in the family," Grandpa told me that evening, wiping sawdust from his palms. "But remember, Iris, family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up." I was only 12. I thought he was being poetic. He wasn't. Family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up. I returned to Cedar Lake every weekend that summer. I learned the water heater's quirks, the windows that stuck, and the way to bleed the radiator. In October, Grandma taught me to arrange the bookshelves by color to make the room feel warmer. Grandpa showed me the iron property line stakes he'd driven into the ground himself. I didn't know it then, but my grandfather was already working with an attorney on plans for this very place, and for me. Back at home in Ridgemont, the atmosphere was different. Our house was comfortable enough. 3 bedrooms, a yard that needed mowing, a garage my father used as an office for his building supply business. It was adequate, but never truly warm. My sister Kelsey, who was 10, occupied the larger bedroom. It had been redecorated in lavender with a desk lamp that cost more than my entire bookshelf. My room still had the tired carpet from the previous owners. At dinner one evening, the conversation turned to the cottage. "Dad's place is just sitting there, losing money," my father, Greg, said, cutting into his steak. "The property taxes alone are eating us alive. We should sell and reinvest the money." My mother, Denise, nodded in agreement. "It makes sense." "Grandpa said the cottage stays in the family," I interjected. Greg dismissed it with a chuckle. "You were 12, Iris. He was just being nice. No one asked for my opinion after that." The conversation quickly shifted to Kelsey's regional debate trophy, which my mother had already framed. I'd won the district science fair 2 weeks prior. My ribbon was still buried in my backpack. After dinner, as I cleared the plates, I noticed a glossy real estate flyer on the counter, half hidden under a grocery list. Ridgeline Development, lakefront lots, premium prices. Now acquiring. A phone number was scrawled in the margin in handwriting I didn't recognize. I slid the flyer back into its place and went upstairs. I sat on my bed, thinking about Grandpa's handmade kitchen table, and the way Grandma always knew what I wanted for lunch without asking. I thought about that flyer downstairs. Someone was already measuring my grandparents' legacy in dollars. Grandpa Harold passed away 2 years later when I was 14. The funeral was on a drizzly Tuesday. Gray sky, damp grass, folding chairs sinking into the soft lawn. I sat in the second row, clutching his handkerchief, blue plaid with frayed edges, still smelling faintly of pine. At the reception, I noticed Greg and his brother Wade standing by the dessert table, not eating, but talking in low voices. Wade had a folder tucked under his arm, and Greg kept nodding. I caught one fragment of their conversation. We should move on this before probate gets tangled. They were discussing the sale of the cottage at their father's funeral. I was 14. I had no influence, no voice, and no idea that my grandfather had already anticipated this exact scenario. 2 more years passed. I was 16 when Grandma Vivian fell ill in March and passed away by June. On my last visit, she held my hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "The cottage is yours, Iris," she whispered. "Promise me you won't let them take it." I promised her. After the funeral, another overcast day, my father sat at our kitchen table and said to Denise, "Now we can finally sort out the property." He said it with relief. That same evening, Wade called. I heard Greg pacing in the garage, talking on the phone. "Yeah, I agree. Let's get it moving." His voice sounded lighter than it had in weeks. I stood in the hallway holding a glass of water, and a realization settled in my chest like a stone. My grandmother's passing wasn't a loss to them. It was a clearance event. I didn't cry that night. I made a different kind of decision. I just didn't know how to act on it yet. From 16 to almost 18, the cottage became my private rebellion. Every Saturday, I drove out to Cedar Lake in the used Honda I'd bought with babysitting money. I patched the porch screen, replaced weather stripping on the back door, and swept pine needles from the roof. Grandpa had taught me that's how leaks start. Back home, the family's language shifted. The cottage stopped being Grandpa's place and became the family property. Wade began showing up every other Sunday with manila folders and real estate listings. I made one attempt. What about Grandma's wish? She wanted me to keep it. Denise set down her fork gently, the same way she would when correcting Kelsey's homework. "Your grandma was emotional at the end, sweetie. This is business." Business. That was the word they used for everything that had once been love. By the time I was 17, Greg grew more direct. "When you turn 18, we'll figure this out as a family," he said. The way he said family, I knew it meant my way. One November afternoon, alone at the cottage, I was clearing the hall closet. Behind a stack of old quilts, I found a sealed envelope in Grandma's handwriting with my name on the front. Inside was a single business card, Margaret Caldwell, attorney at law. Below her name, printed in small type, T. Main Family Trust. My hands shook, not from fear, but from recognition. Grandma left this for me to find. She knew I'd be the one cleaning the closets. I slipped the card into my wallet. 3 months before my 18th birthday, Margaret Caldwell called me first. The call came on a Thursday evening in February. I was in my room doing homework when an unknown number appeared. "Iris, this is Margaret Caldwell. I was your grandparents' attorney." Her voice was professional and careful, as if rehearsed. "We need to speak before your birthday. There are important things you need to know." She asked me to meet her at her downtown office the following Saturday. Alone, Margaret was in her late 50s with silver hair and reading glasses on a chain. Her office was small and smelled of old paper and coffee. She opened a folder. "Your grandparents hired me 6 years ago," she began. "They established an irrevocable trust, the cottage, a savings account, and an investment portfolio totaling approximately $2.1 million. All of it is held in the trust. You are the sole beneficiary. The room felt like it was tilting. My grandparents had left me everything. They'd transferred the assets while they were alive, so the trust never entered their estate and bypassed probate completely. Your father and uncle have no legal claim to it. She slid a summary across the desk. The title to the cottage had been recorded under the trust at the county recorder's office 6 years ago. Your father doesn't know that. Why didn't they tell him? I asked. Margaret paused. Your grandfather said, and I quote, "My sons will sell that cabin before the funeral flowers wilt." The room was quiet. Then Margaret added, "Someone has been making inquiries at the county recorder's office about the cottage's title within the last month." I started paying closer attention after that. The next Sunday, Wade came over for dinner. Afterwards, he and Greg disappeared into the garage. The door was open a crack, just enough to hear. "I signed the purchase agreement with Ridgeline Development," Wade said. "But we need the title cleared before closing." "How do we get it clean?" "Quit claim deed," Greg replied. "Dad and Mom are gone. We're the legal heirs. We quit claim the property to ourselves, record it, and sell." "Is that legal?" Wade asked. "It's a standard real estate transfer between heirs. Nobody's going to question it." Then, Greg, quieter. "What about Iris?" Wade's reply came fast, as if he'd already thought it through. "She's 17, Greg. She can't do anything. And by the time she's 18, the sale will be done. We'll give her a cut, 50 grand for college. She'll get over it." I stepped back from the garage door, my hands cold. Wade had already signed a purchase agreement for $450,000 with a development company for a cottage he didn't own, on land held in a trust he didn't know existed. That night, I texted Margaret, "They're moving faster." She replied, "I expected that. Come see me Saturday." I closed my phone and stared at the ceiling, knowing that in the garage there was a contract that was already worthless. The following Saturday, Margaret laid out the legal strategy on a legal pad. The cabin's title is already under the trust. If Wade tries to file a quitclaim deed, the county recorder should reject it because the chain of title won't match. The property hasn't been in your grandparents' personal name for 6 years. But if he submits extra documentation, an affidavit of heirship, maybe even a falsified death certificate, he could create a cloud on title. It wouldn't give him ownership, but it could tie the property up in litigation for a year or more. "So I have to act first," I said. "You have to act on time," she corrected. She tapped the calendar. "The moment you turn 18, you're a legal adult. You can formally accept your role as successor beneficiary. Once you sign, I'll file a lease pendens, a public notice of legal interest. It freezes the title instantly. No one can record anything against it." I nodded. "What do I need to do?" "Show up and sign one document. I'll handle the rest." "Should I tell my parents?" Margaret removed her glasses. "Your grandfather specifically asked me to protect you, Iris, not to negotiate with them." I drove home. Greg was in the kitchen. "Cheerful, good news, kiddo. I'm throwing you a birthday party. Saturday night. Whole family. It's a big one, 18. He smiled. Denise smiled. Even Kelsey clapped. I smiled too. My dad was planning my birthday party. My uncle was planning to sell my grandmother's cottage, and I was sitting at the kitchen table smiling because in 9 days I was going to let them believe everything was going exactly according to their schedule. To be honest, sitting in my room that night, knowing what was coming, was one of the hardest things I've ever done. Part of me wanted to walk downstairs and say it, "Dad, I know." But Margaret was right. If I tipped them off, they'd find another way. Sometimes staying silent is the loudest form of protection. Here's my question for you. Have you ever had to stay silent to protect yourself, even when every part of you wanted to speak up? Tell me in the comments. 5 days before my birthday, my mom sat down beside me on the couch, using her "let's talk like adults" voice. "Now that you're almost 18, Denise said. There are some family decisions we should make together. Together, the word felt like a costume. The cottage costs money to maintain, she continued. Taxes, insurance, repairs. Your father's business has been struggling. If we sell, we could pay off the debt and set up college funds for both you and Kelsey. Grandma wanted me to keep it, I said. Denise's expression shifted, a flash of impatience, quickly masked. Your grandmother was very sentimental at the end, Iris. But sentiment doesn't pay property taxes. Greg walked in, right on cue. I've already talked to a buyer, he said. Good price. Fair deal. Who's the buyer? I asked. A development company. Wade knows them. What company? He paused. Ridgeline something. They're reputable. I didn't push further. I'll think about it, I said. Greg patted my shoulder and walked away, satisfied, as if he'd just closed a negotiation. Later that night, Kelsey knocked on my door. She sat on the edge of my bed, picking at a loose thread. Mom and Dad keep talking about the cabin at night after I'm supposed to be asleep. They sound different, excited, but also nervous. Is something going on? I pulled the blanket over her feet. Don't worry about it, Kels, she nodded, but she didn't look convinced. 3 days before my birthday, Uncle Wade showed up unannounced. He caught me in the driveway as I returned from the grocery store. Casual clothes, a wide smile, leaning against his car like he just happened to be in the neighborhood. But Wade was a real estate agent. Nothing he did was accidental. Hey, kiddo, got a minute? He sat on the front steps. That lake lot, just the land, is worth $450. I can get us a deal with a buyer I trust. Fast, close, clean paperwork. And what do I get? I asked. $50,000 cash for college. I let the number hang in the air. Whose name is on the deed, Uncle Wade? His smile froze for a fraction of a second, a flicker behind his eyes. Your grandparents. But they're gone now. It passes to your dad and me as next of kin. That's not how it works, I thought. He sold houses for a living. He should have known. But he was counting on me not knowing. I'll think about it, I said again. Wade stood up, brushing off his jeans. Don't overthink this one, Iris. Opportunities like this don't wait. He drove away, and before he was even at the end of the street, he was on his phone, his mouth moving behind the windshield. That night, I texted Margaret again. They're accelerating. Her reply, 3 more days. Stay the course. I could do 3 more days. The night before my birthday, I drove to the cottage alone. The road was quiet. Cedar Lake lay flat and dark beneath a half moon. The pines along the bank like cutouts against the sky. I parked in the gravel patch Grandpa had leveled himself. I walked up the porch steps, the second one still creaked, and sat in the chair beside the one that used to be his. The air smelled of rain and pine resin. I checked my email. Margaret had sent the complete document package, the acceptance of successor beneficiary form, the beneficiary designation confirmation, a 1-page summary of the trust terms, everything flagged with sticky tabs, ready for my signature. At midnight, I read each document twice. Then I closed my laptop and listened to the lake. Grandpa used to sit right here and say, "Patience isn't weakness, Iris, it's timing." I always thought he was talking about fishing. The tears came without warning, not a collapse, just a quiet overflow. I cried because I wished this were different. I wished my father had been the kind of man who would have taken me fishing here instead of calculating its resale value. I wished my mother had asked what I wanted instead of telling me what was practical. I wished I didn't have to sign a legal document at midnight to protect myself from the people who were supposed to protect me. But wishes don't hold up in court. Trust documents do. I wiped my face, locked the cottage door, and drove home. I set my alarm for 11:45 p.m. In 6 hours, I'd turn 18. In 7, my family would find out the cottage was never theirs to take. 11:50 p.m. My bedroom door was closed, the house silent. I opened my laptop and connected to the video call. Margaret appeared in her home office, reading glasses on, a stack of papers lit by a desk lamp. "Ready?" she asked. "Ready. When the clock hits midnight, you are a legal adult. I'll walk you through the signing." She went through it one more time. I signed the acceptance form, a single page confirming I was formally receiving the trust my grandparents had created. From that second forward, every decision about the trust's assets ran through me and Margaret. "Now," she said, "first thing tomorrow morning, I'll go to the county recorder's office and file a lis pendens. That's a public notice of pending legal interest. Once it's recorded, no one can sell, transfer, or encumber the title while it's active." "What if they've already filed something?" I asked. "Then, whatever they filed will be flagged. The chain of title will show the trust recorded 6 years ago, not your father. Any conflicting document will be rejected." I looked at the signed paper in my hand, my name in ink, my grandparents' names in print above mine. "Your grandfather's last gift," Margaret said softly. "You just had to be old enough to accept it." The clock on my laptop read 12:03 a.m. I was 18. I was the legal beneficiary of the T. Main Family Irrevocable Trust, and downstairs my uncle's quitclaim deed was already a dead document. He'd find that out in about 9 hours. Across town, Wade was printing documents. I pieced this together later. He printed a quitclaim deed, a one-page form that transfers property rights without any warranty of ownership. Legitimate when used correctly. Criminal when the person signing it has no rights to transfer. He called Greg at 11:30 p.m. "Everything's ready. We file at 9. What he didn't know was that the title search would reveal the trust. He'd also signed the purchase agreement with Ridgeline Development 2 months prior. If he couldn't deliver a clean title within 30 days, he'd owe them a $45,000 penalty, plus damages. Wade had bet nearly $500,000 on a property that didn't belong to him. He just didn't know it yet. My birthday party started at 4 in the afternoon. The living room was full, about 20 people. Neighbors, friends from church, a few of my father's old business contacts. Nora Beckett from the cottage next door was there too, sitting near the window. Watchful, there were balloons, a banner reading Happy 18th in silver letters, and a sheet cake from the Main Street bakery. I smiled. I thanked everyone. I opened small gifts, a journal, a gift card, a picture frame. In my jacket pocket, folded neatly, was the signed acceptance form from last night. I didn't touch it. It was already done. Greg stood up and tapped his glass. "I just want to say that Iris is officially an adult today. Denise and I are so proud of her." He paused, scanning the room. "And as a family, we have some exciting plans for the future." He looked at me. "Right, Iris?" Every face turned toward me. "Thanks, Dad," I said. Nothing more. From the corner of my eye, I saw Wade by the front door, checking his phone, typing fast. Nora caught my arm as I passed. "Your grandmother would want you to know something," she said quietly. "I saw your uncle at the cottage last week with 2 men in suits. They were walking the lot line with a measuring tape. Wade had brought the buyers to the property before he even had the title. After the cake was cut, Greg stood again, his voice louder this time. Before we wrap up, I want to share something with everyone. Our family has been going through a tough time financially, but Harold and Vivian left us the cottage, and as a family, we've decided to sell it to secure everyone's future. We've decided. He looked right at me. Iris understands. She knows this is what's best for all of us. Right, sweetheart? The room waited. Every eye found me. Denise added, smiling, "It's what responsible families do. We sacrifice for each other." I set my fork on my plate. The clink was the only sound in the room. "I never agreed to sell the cottage, Dad." Greg's smile stayed fixed, but his jaw tightened. "She's kidding. Birthday nerves." I'm not kidding, I said. Wade stepped forward. Come on, Iris, this isn't the time or place. I took a slow sip of water and set the glass down. You're right, Uncle Wade. This isn't the time. The time is 8 a.m. tomorrow morning. Silence. Wade's phone buzzed in his pocket. The guests started leaving after that. Within 30 minutes, the living room was down to family, Nora, and 2 neighbors who didn't know whether to stay or go. Denise waited until the front door closed, then turned on me in the kitchen, her voice sharp. Do you have any idea what your father is going through? He might lose this house. Our house. And you're holding on to a cabin you visit on weekends? I visit every weekend, Mom. That's not the point. She pressed her palms flat on the counter. We are a family. Families make decisions together. If you loved this family, you wouldn't need a lawyer to tell you what to do. I stared at her. How do you know about a lawyer? Denise didn't flinch. Wade found the business card in your bag last week. Margaret Caldwell. Who is she, Iris? My stomach dropped. They'd been going through my things. Before I could answer, Nora's voice cut through from the doorway. That girl has every right to talk to a lawyer, Denise. Vivian would have wanted that. Nora didn't move. Vivian was my friend for 40 years. I think I know what she wanted. The silence between them could have cracked glass. Now it was just the 5 of us. Greg, Denise, Wade, Kelsey, and me. Greg closed the kitchen door. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. He pulled out a chair and sat down, folding his hands on the table like a man about to deliver terms. Here's what's going to happen, Iris. Tomorrow morning, Wade and I go to the county office. We file the paperwork. The cabin sells. You get your share, and we move on as a family. What's my share, I asked. 50,000. Out of how much? Greg didn't answer. Wade filled the gap. Don't make this harder than it needs to be. I looked at my father. And if I say no? Greg's jaw set. If you fight this, you're on your own. No more help with college. No more living under this roof. The kitchen was very quiet. The faucet dripped once. You're threatening to kick me out on my 18th birthday. I'm asking you to be part of this family. I pushed back from the table and stood. I am part of this family, Dad. I'm the part that keeps promises. I walked upstairs, closed my door, and sat on the bed. Breathing, Greg thought his deadline was 9:00 a.m. at the county recorder's office. He didn't know that Margaret's deadline was 8:00. At 8:00 a.m., the county recorder's office opened. Margaret Caldwell was the first person through the door. She presented 2 documents, a certified copy of the trust and a lose pendens notice, and asked for them to be recorded against the Cedar Lake property. The clerk reviewed the paperwork, checked the existing title records, and stamped it recorded. Done. At 8:14 a.m., Margaret called me. It's done. The list pendens is recorded. The property is flagged. Whatever they bring in will be rejected. I was sitting at the kitchen table eating cereal. Greg was upstairs getting dressed. Denise was making coffee. Normal morning sounds. At 8:30, Greg and Wade came downstairs. Greg was wearing his business shirt, the one he wore to bank meetings before the store went under. Wade had his folder tucked under his arm. We'll be back by lunch, Greg said, grabbing his keys. I looked up from my bowl. Good luck, I said. I'll never know exactly what their faces looked like, but I know what happened because Margaret stayed at the recorder's office on purpose. At 9:05 a.m., Wade approached the counter. He slid the quitclaim deed across with a confident nod. The clerk took the document, typed the parcel number into the system, and then she stopped. I can't record this document, sir. Wade leaned forward. Excuse me? The property title is held under the T. Main Family Irrevocable Trust. It was recorded in 2020. There's also a list pendens filed this morning. Wade's face drained. That's impossible. My parents own that property. Sir, the deed was transferred to the trust 6 years ago. This quitclaim doesn't match the current ownership record. Greg stepped up. There's no trust. Our parents never mentioned a trust. The clerk glanced between them. I'd recommend you speak with the trustee listed on the filing. A Margaret Caldwell. Wade's hand flattened on the counter. Greg turned to him slowly. You said this was simple. You're a real estate agent, Wade. How did you not check the title first? The call came at 9:22 a.m. I was sitting on the porch watching the neighbor's sprinkler arc across the lawn. What did you do? Greg's voice was tight, shaking. I accepted what Grandpa and Grandma left me. That's all. You went behind our backs with some lawyer we've never heard of. Margaret Caldwell has been the trust attorney for 6 years, Dad. You just never asked. A beat of silence. Heavy breathing. This is my parents' property, Iris. I'm their son. I kept my voice even. It wasn't because they didn't love you. It was because they didn't trust you with it. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. I counted 3 full arcs of the sprinkler before he spoke again. We'll fight this. You can try. But the trust is irrevocable. There's nothing to undo. He hung up, no goodbye, just a click. Then my phone buzzed again. An unfamiliar number. Miss T-Main, this is Carter Briggs from Ridgeline Development. We need to talk. He spoke fast. We have a purchase agreement with Wade T-Main for the Cedar Lake property. He guaranteed clean title. We've just been informed there's a lease pendens on the parcel. That's correct, I said. Can you explain the situation? My uncle does not own that property. He never did. The cabin and land have been held in an irrevocable trust since 2020. I'm the sole beneficiary. A pause. He represented himself as the heir. I understand, but representation doesn't create ownership. Miss T-Main. Is there any possibility of a sale? We'd be prepared to make a competitive offer directly to the trust. The property is not for sale. Within the hour, Margaret confirmed to Ridgeline's legal team that the trust was valid. Wade had no authority. Ridgeline pursued him for breach of contract, the $45,000 penalty plus damages. Greg came home at 2:00 p.m. He moved through the door like a man carrying something invisible and heavy. He sat across from me at the dining table and stared at the table for a long time. I'm going to lose this house, Iris, he said, his voice flat. The bank is on me for $180,000. The store is gone. That cabin was supposed to be our way out. I know you're struggling, Dad. I'm sorry about the business. Then help us. The cabin was never your way out. It was Grandpa and Grandma's gift to me. He almost laughed. A gift? For what? You're 18. What does an 18-year-old need with a lakefront cottage? It's not about what I need. It's about what they wanted. Denise stepped in. They were old, Iris. They weren't thinking clearly at the end. They were thinking clearly enough to hire a lawyer 6 years before they died. Greg slammed his palm on the table. I'll contest the trust. A voice came through my phone. I'd called Margaret before Greg walked in and left the line open on speaker. Mr. T-Main, Margaret said, contesting an irrevocable trust established 6 years before the grantor's deaths, with full legal capacity documented and witnessed, will cost you more in legal fees than the property is worth. I'd strongly advise against it. The kitchen was silent. Greg looked at me. Really looked. For the first time, I saw something in my father's eyes I'd never seen before. Not anger. Recognition. 2 hours later, Wade called. Greg picked up in the living room. I heard every word through the thin wall. Ridgeline is suing me. Wade's voice was raw. $45,000 in penalties plus damages. They're saying I committed fraud. Greg's reply was cold. Did you? I thought we owned it. You're a real estate agent, Wade. You do title searches for a living. How did you not check? I assumed. You assumed. Greg paused. But I didn't forge a notary stamp. A long silence. I didn't forge. I just found a stamp. And that's forgery. You know that's forgery. Wade's breathing grew heavier. I need a lawyer. So do I. Greg paused. Don't call this house again until you've talked to one. He hung up. Over the next 3 weeks, the consequences fell like dominoes. Ridgeline Development filed a civil suit against Wade T. Main. The county district attorney received a referral regarding the forged notary stamp. Wade's real estate license was suspended. Word traveled. Court filings are public record, and Ridgeline's lawsuit named the Cedar Lake property by parcel number. Wade called me once. Iris, please, can you ask your lawyer to drop the lease pendants? If the title is cleared, I might be able to negotiate with Ridgeline. The lease pendants protects my property, Uncle Wade. It stays. Your grandparents would be ashamed of you, he said. I let the sentence sit. Then I said, my grandparents are the ones who set this up. They chose this. They chose me, so I don't think shame is what they'd feel. He hung up. Greg didn't contest the trust. Instead, he sold the building supply store at a loss, enough to negotiate a repayment plan with the bank. The house stayed. Barely. Denise went back to work for the first time in a decade. She told the neighbors she wanted to stay busy. Nobody believed that. But nobody pushed. Greg and I didn't speak for 2 weeks after that morning. The house was quiet in a way that felt permanent. Nora brought me pie one afternoon. Your parents made their choices, she said. But they're still your parents. Don't carry their shame. That's theirs. Then Kelsey called. I don't understand everything that happened, she said, but I'm sorry they put you through this. I drove to the cottage on a Saturday morning in late April. The dogwoods along the lake road were blooming, white and pale pink against the dark water. I unlocked the front door with the same key Grandpa had given me when I was 14. The cottage smelled the same, pine and old books and that faint sweet scent I've never been able to name. I walked through every room. The kitchen table Grandpa built, Grandma's bookshelves, organized by color. The porch where we watched the lake turn gold. In the desk drawer by the window, I found an envelope. My name on the front in Grandpa's handwriting. Margaret had told me it would be there. I opened it carefully. It was a letter, 1 page, written in blue ink, his handwriting loosening toward the bottom. He wrote that he knew his sons would try to sell the cottage. He didn't blame them. Greg was his boy, and he loved him. But Greg never understood the difference between something that has value and something that's valuable. He chose me not because I was perfect, but because I was the one who asked whether the roof needed patching before I ever asked what the place was worth. The last line read, "Take care of it. It took care of you first." I folded the letter and sat on the porch. Margaret called me the following week. The lease pendants can be withdrawn now. The property record will show the trust as sole owner. Clean, no encumbrances. Wade settled with Ridgeline. The deal is dead. As for the forged notary stamp, the Dawes office is reviewing. He could face a misdemeanor or felony charge. His license is suspended indefinitely. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt exhaustion. One more thing, Margaret said. Your grandparents designated a separate educational fund, $50,000 for your college expenses. It's been accruing interest for 6 years. The balance is just over $58,000. My eyes stung. 50,000. The same number Greg had offered me as my share of the sale. My grandparents had already set it aside quietly, without telling anyone. I enrolled at Ridgemont Community College that week, environmental science with a minor in forestry. The campus is 20 minutes from the cottage. Under current address, I wrote the cottage's address for the first time. I asked Greg and Denise to meet me at a coffee shop on Birch Street, neutral ground. They arrived together. Greg was wearing a flannel I hadn't seen in years, one of Grandpa's. Denise held her purse clutched tight against her side. I love you, I said. Both of you. I need you to know that. The cottage is not for sale. Not now, not ever. I won't be made to feel guilty for keeping a promise I made to Grandma, a promise she trusted me to keep because she didn't think anyone else would. Greg stared into his coffee. I'm not cutting you out of my life, I continued. But if we're going to have a relationship, it has to be built on respect, not on what I can give you financially, not on guilt. Denise started to speak, then stopped. Greg finally looked up. I don't know how to fix this. You don't have to fix it today. I'll call you Sunday. He nodded. One small nod. I walked out into the sunlight. Kelsey showed up at the cottage on a Sunday afternoon in May, carrying a pizza box. I brought lunch, she said. Hope you like pepperoni. Always. We sat on the porch. The lake was still. A heron stood in the shallows near the dock. Kelsey ate slowly. I didn't know about any of it, she said finally. Mom and Dad never told me. I know. Was I part of the problem? I looked at her, 15, thin-shouldered, still growing into whoever she'd become. She didn't choose any of this. She didn't ask to be the favorite. You were a kid, Kels, we both were. She nodded, looking out at the water. It's really beautiful here. Grandma used to say the same thing every single time she sat in that chair. Kelsey glanced at the empty chair next to mine. Can I come back sometimes? Anytime, she leaned her head against my shoulder for just a moment. Then she sat up and took another bite of pizza. We didn't talk about trusts or lawsuits. We talked about her school project, about the heron, about whether the dock needed new planks this summer. The cabin didn't just protect property. It made space for something new to start. Early June, 6 a.m. I'm on the porch with a cup of coffee, watching the mist lift off Cedar Lake. The pines are sharp against a pale sky. A loon calls somewhere out on the water. I didn't win against my family. There's no winning when the people who hurt you are the people who were supposed to protect you. You don't get a trophy for surviving something that should never have happened in the first place. But I kept a promise, and for the first time in my life, I'm standing somewhere that belongs to me. Not because I fought for it, but because two people loved me enough to plan for exactly this. They saw the storm before I did. They built the shelter before I knew I'd need one. They couldn't stop my parents from being who they are. They couldn't make Greg less desperate or Denise less afraid. They couldn't keep Wade from chasing money that wasn't his, but they could make sure I had ground to stand on. Literally, I think about the letter, about Grandpa's words, the difference between something that has value and something that's valuable. This cottage has both, but only one can be measured. My family spent 2 years focused on the wrong one. I sip my coffee. The mist clears. The lake turns blue. Peace doesn't come from revenge. It comes from standing on something solid. If you're listening and you feel like nobody's in your corner, I want you to hear me. Sometimes the people who protect you aren't the ones standing in front of you. Sometimes they planned for you years ago, quietly, without telling anyone. Sometimes all you have to do is show up, sign the paper, and keep the promise. That's my story. If it made you feel something, anger, relief, hope, or just a little less alone, then it did what I hoped it would. Now, I have a question for you. If you could protect one thing in your life, a place, a person, a promise, what would it be? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. If this story stayed with you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd love to have you here for the next one. Check the description for more stories like this.